Hello and welcome to the first episode of Veterans Heartbeat. My name is Jason Zenkgraf. My co-host is Ed Lisofsky here with me. We also have Dr. Margaret Coffey, and we also have Felipe Von Sada, also known as Fez, here in the studio, local veteran. So, Veterans Heartbeat is a weekly discussion of issues, events, opportunities, and needs in our veterans community. Morning, how you doing, Ed?
Good morning.
All right, how you doing, Fez?
Very good. Thank you for having me here today.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. How you doing, Dr. Coffey?
I am great and so happy to be here.
Fantastic. All right, let's get rolling. First off, we'd like to thank our sponsor, the Man Shop. Fantastic place in town. If you haven't been there before, they have everything from arcade games to basketball. They have great haircuts, head massages, things like that. Ed and I went in there the other day, got some haircuts looking pretty spiffy. So yeah, check them out if you get a chance. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is just there's a lot of different issues in the veterans community. You know, a lot of good, a lot of bad, but we're going to focus on different areas that veterans may be struggling and things that they could use aid or assistance in any way that they may or may not be getting the assistance they need right now. Do you want to start us off, Ed? What areas do you think are the most important or at least the most prevalent in terms of issues that need to be addressed?
Well, one of the reasons that we've got Dr. Coffey here in the studio today is health care, access to health care. A lot of veterans are trying to figure it out, and the VA is a very large system that is hard to navigate. So we're going to address that during this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big one for a lot of veterans is health care. That's usually the number one gripe is it takes too long to get in or it's not quality, whatever it may be. But we'll get around to, misconceptions about that and different issues people run into. How about you, Fez? What's another issue you think veterans run into?
Information in general. As you're separating from active service, they try to do a good job at putting you with your local VA representative, but most of us do not serve where we want to live. So when we get back home, it's very difficult to find that person to ultimately get what you want, have it be healthcare or schooling.
Yeah, absolutely. Guidance. Yeah, that's a big one.
Dr. Coffey is a veteran, and it's female veteran has a lot of different needs. So what is your perspective from the female world?
Sure, thanks for the question. I think one of the issues for every veteran is community. It's something that's sometimes a little difficult to find. People have very different experiences in their military careers, and it can be very difficult to find friendships, to find community, to find like-minded people, to find supportive relationships, and River is really a phenomenal asset to establishing that community.
Fantastic. So we talked about healthcare, guidance in the veteran community, where to go, what to do, and then, networking, relationships, who's going to help them out in the area that they need. So let's go ahead and start off with healthcare. What have you noticed in the veterans realm that is the number one issue in terms of healthcare?
My background for the last 4 years has been building the River program. I've worked as a clinical suicidologist, going post-grad in several classes to do work in the veterans world. Currently, Jason and I have been functioning in the rural areas of Montana, and what we're seeing is a lot of the veterans are out there simply don't have the ability to go down to the next town. I mean, it's like 5 hours for some of these guys for a simple physical therapy appointment.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of guys in eastern, very, very eastern and northern Montana where it's 5 hours to get to Billings. Physical therapy, they're going to drive 5 hours there and then 5 hours back. It's not practical. You have a 9 to 5. You can't take 2 days off a week for your physical therapy, so it's just not realistic for them. So that's a big issue with Montana being the fourth largest state. There's a lot of ground to cover and a lot of rural ground. We don't have these little clinics and hospitals that the VA recognizes and that they can go to in these areas. So that's a big issue.
And while we have a really good CBOC here with a lot of good providers, there's just not enough of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We're joined here by Terry Wall. He is the commander of the American Legion Post 134 in Florence. How you doing, Terry?
Doing well, thank you.
All right. So let's go ahead and dive in. Do you want to start us off here, Ed?
Well, Terry, one of the things that we were curious about is, as the post commander, what have you been seeing that's going on in the veterans world? What kind of issues are needing to be addressed?
Well, a big thing when I talk to veterans is the improvements in the VA, and it's been slow coming, but it's getting there as far as their medical care and this type of thing.
We've got in the studio Dr. Coffey, and Dr. Coffey is joined the River team. She will be offering a free clinic on Thursday afternoons at the River office from 3 to 6. Do you think that's going to help?
I think anything that works with the veterans to improve their accessibility to health care and improve their health is definitely a good thing.
What are some of the things the Legion's doing right now to help out in the veterans world?
Well, generally we honor veterans at various times during the year, and we also do a lot of different community service projects, not only for veterans but also for the community and the neighborhoods.
You've got a lot of veterans down in the Bitterroot, don't you?
Yes, we have quite a ratio down here.
So what are some of the things that you could see we could be doing to bring light or helping out down there through this show? Do you have any ideas?
Right now, just some of the things I could think of would be just good rural accessibility to health care. Most of these rural communities have a tough time, and I guess with some of these new programs coming out in the VA, a person can, if he lives greater than 50 or 75 miles, I have to look at what the rules are, but he could go to a local service provider.
We've been talking to Dr. Coffey. Would it help if we had outreach clinics like a walk-in through the Legion?
Yeah, well, like I said, anything that would help. I mean, we've got a Legion, like in Missoula, we have 4 or 5 different posts in Missoula, and I think maybe not quite that, maybe 3, but we have 13 throughout western Montana, and they're pretty active Legion posts.
Veteran suicide is a big issue in Montana, is it not?
Yes, I guess it's higher than the average for the general population.
Statistically, we are being informed that it's somewhere around 1 every 36 hours in the state. Do you agree with that?
I've seen different statistics. It sounds approximately right.
One of the issues that we see a lot of in my practice, and I think Dr. Coffey sees it, is misdiagnosing of the PTSD. Everybody just jumps it into one bucket. Do you see that down there?
I'm not real familiar, but I guess there's some different types of things that have happened since the Gulf with some of the chemicals and also some of the new medication they were using. That was a different type of medication. They've indicated that there could be some neurological problems from that medication, as well as the nerve agents they had in Iraq.
So a lot of different issues are going on in the veterans world. I really appreciate your time, Terry. It's we want to get you and more post commanders on this show. We're going to be running it throughout the year, and we definitely appreciate your time in talking with us this morning.
You're welcome. And it's something that would help get the information out to the public from the different commanders and the different things we hear and see and read through some of our publications that come down from the National.
Well, do you have any big events or anything coming up that you want to share with the listeners?
Not right now. This is a little bit of a slow time, just especially the weather. And we have different things that go on throughout the year. And we're trying to get the greater community more involved as we put these different things out. Down here, there's a lot of information going out through like the Bitterroot Star, because there's a lot of veterans down here, and they publish all the different meetings for the different posts down here, and then the different things for the VFW and all the different units that help the veterans and the service organizations.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Terry.
Well, thank you, and I thank you for putting me on here today.
Not a problem.
Well, thanks to Terry for that input there. Dr. Coffey, do you have anything to add to what he was saying?
Yes, I think Terry and Ed brought up a really important point about whether we're diagnosing our veterans correctly. And Terry brought up some really interesting information from some of the different conflicts that have happened, how they've been managed medically, and what veterans have been exposed to. And then Ed has also been doing a lot of research into, I think as he mentioned, whether veterans have PTSD, which is a diagnosable condition that requires that veterans meet certain criteria, or whether there's actually something else going on. And I think this issue is something that we as healthcare providers really need to be very cognizant of, that we're treating the correct condition for each veteran, and each veteran is different. I think that's something that sometimes as a nation, or even in the healthcare world, we tend to sort of lump people together. And every veteran has different exposures from different conflicts, came in with a different set of circumstances in their personal health. So they really need to be seen as individual people and make sure that they're diagnosed correctly and then can be treated effectively.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, one thing that we've noticed is traumatic brain injury, TBI, and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, have so many of the same symptoms. Well, how do you know if it's one or the other? A lot of the times, guys say, "Oh, I have this, this, and this. Oh, that's PTSD. Check." And when perhaps it's a little bit of both, or one or the other. So yeah, thank you. How about you, Fez? Do you have anything to add?
I completely agree with what Dr. Coffey had to say. As a veteran that uses the system a lot medically, I feel that my doctor is either pushing me towards a diagnosis or pushing me away from a diagnosis. I don't necessarily feel that I'm being treated as an individual and more of a just a number in the end of his day.
Yeah, thank you, Fez, for adding to that. Hey, we're back here with Mike Hopkins. He's a House Representative from District 92. How you doing, Mike?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
Not too shabby. I'll pass it over to Ed and let him lead the way here for a bit.
Hey,
All
Mike,
right.
you've been
Hey there.
working with us here at River, and you're over at the legislature. Is there any exciting news coming out of the legislature for veterans right now?
Yes, no, and partially. The legislature has sort of a tempo that it moves at the beginning of the session. So we have a couple bills certainly dealing with veterans coming up right now, but the majority of the larger legislation you can see in the pipeline, it just hasn't fully reached the committee or House floor level yet.
You've been working with River on another program. We had Terry Wall, the post commander from Florence of the American Legion, on, saying how difficult it was to get rural health care. You've been working with River on another program. Do you mind explaining what that is?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically it's just addressing what you just said, right? One of the problems I think we have in the state in a lot of different areas is that a lot of times we're unable to get care to where care needs to be for no other reason than just a bunch of red tape, right? Somebody got here in years before us, decided that things needed to go through X line of procedural moves or certifications or whatever. And sometimes we don't have the foresight to see that making people go through that stuff prevents us from getting care to areas that we would otherwise be able to get care to, right? And so in this case, it's a whole lot of just getting state red tape and regulation out of the way so that individuals that can get care and that have providers that are able to work with them in the area but are prohibited from doing so because of current state law, getting that out of the way so that we can actually, do the job that we're intending to do.
And we're talking about a community veteran EMT program, am I correct on that?
Yep, exactly.
And right now, currently, EMTs, according to the medical board, are not licensed in order to work in a non-emergency, and that's one of the big red tapes that is causing a lot of problems, is it not?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about, right? So in one sense, you can kind of understand how something like that could come around. But in government, what we're not supposed to be dealing with is words, but how things actually work when the rubber meets the road in people's everyday lives. So even if you started out at the point of saying, well, I don't think that EMTs should be allowed to provide services in emergency situations for X, Y, or Z, you then have to look at the way that it actually works out. And the way that it actually works out is that there's a whole bunch of people that could be receiving care there's no way that you could say that there's another situation in which care is more needed, that they could absolutely be getting if it were not for this stupid little piece of red tape.
And the red tape we're talking about is currently the licensure is under Title 50 instead of Title 37. And so
exactly.
So
when people hear that, they think to themselves, well, that means absolutely nothing to me. But it's just one of those things about government. You can make what seems to be a small mistake, and at the time you think it's a good idea, but then when you actually see how it works in practice, it just looks incredibly stupid. And when it's costing us in the way that this is costing us, literally, it boggles the mind.
Right now, with 5,000 licensed EMTs in the state of Montana, approximately, it would be a benefit, would it not, Dr. Coffey, to allow these EMTs to at least be an extension of you in your practice if you were working with the veteran population? And Dr. Coffey's in the studio with us.
Certainly, there need to be solutions beyond what we're doing now, and empowering EMTs to have a wider role in these rural communities sounds like a really good solution to that. Representative Hopkins, what's kind of the next step for you?
So the legislative process is always fun. We're looking at a couple of different bills that are already making their way through the legislature and seeing whether or not the fix that we're talking about here better fits into one of those bills or as a standalone bill itself. So all of those are in the works simultaneously, and it's just sort of a question of seeing which place does it better fit, partially to make sure that it actually happens and goes through, but also partially to make sure that when it actually goes through and is put into law, that it does what we intend it to. Right? Because if you look at the way that things are now, I don't think that people would say that they intended for veterans to not get care in situations where they could absolutely be getting care simply because this happens to be in one section rather than another. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Mike, we have in the studio Fez, who has a master's degree and is actually teaching in the community veteran EMT program that River sponsors and the VA has approved for the GI Bill. Have you got any questions for Fez?
I don't right now, but I would certainly love to be able to contact him with questions, especially as we run up to these bills actually hitting committees and hitting the House floor and the Senate floor, et cetera, if that would be okay.
Absolutely, Mike. You can get a hold of me whenever you want, and I will answer whatever questions you may have.
The other thing that we're seeing over here, Mike, is the veteran suicide rate. We are number one in the nation with a veteran committing suicide at the rate of 1 every 36 hours. Do you see the legislature really trying to address that?
You know, I do. Obviously, politics can get a little fishy at times. But one of the things that I've really appreciated being here for this session is that both Republicans and Democrats seem to have a real level head on their shoulder when it comes to seeing this problem for what it is. There's a lot of people that have given more than any normal person can really comprehend for this state, for their local communities, for their families, loved ones, and for their country. And they're being really underserved right now when they could be getting care that could be saving their lives. You have to say that this is the biggest problem in the state. It's a terrible fact to say that in a state that has one of the highest per capita rates of service members living in the state, that we also have an associated statistic of one of the highest, suicide rates in the country. It's something that needs to be addressed. And I think that this session stands a really legitimate chance of taking a really legitimate crack at it.
Well, I appreciate your time. Jason, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks for hopping in on the call with us, Mike. We appreciate your time and hope you have a good day.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me. You as well.
Well, we're glad Mike was able to hop on our show. So now we're going to start talking a little bit more about what River is. We've kind of mentioned River. We've also mentioned this suicide rate of 1 every 36 hours, which seems exorbitantly high. So we're going to kind of explain that and also explain what River is. First off, let's talk about River. Ed, do you want to kind of give an overview of what River stands for, what the acronym is, and then also what we do?
River is the Rural Institute Veterans Education and Research. It was started in my Master's of Social Work program when I was working as the chief caseworker for the American Red Cross. I would constantly go to a lot of these meetings. Everybody was talking about, we've got to solve the suicide rate. Nothing was being done. We'd say, well, that was a good meeting, next meeting. It happens. It's nobody's fault. It just happens. So I took the reins, developed River after developing or going through a lot of classes through the American Association of Suicidology to learn the theories behind suicide. Once we learned those theories, things like the CVEMT or the Community Veteran EMT, where we're providing rural care, which Idaho has the same law that we're looking for within Montana. So we're not asking for something that's unique. We're just asking for it to be placed into Montana so these veterans get some care. Then we noticed that a lot of the veterans have all of these recreational opportunities and they're not being taken advantage of, and the ones that are taking them out fishing don't have the training. So we developed a school that trains the CVEMTs and recreational therapists. So currently we have, 33 students, Fez?
Yes, currently enrolled.
They come into the River program in different ways. So we've actually been making a big difference. The rate of suicide, 1 every 36 hours, when you look at the statistics, a lot of the statistics are based on death certificate. But yet in the 150 plus families that I've worked with post completion of a suicide, we have seen at least 100 of those were not listed as a suicide, but yet everybody knew it. What happens if a guy drives into a bridge abutment? How do you determine that? I'm trained in doing psychological autopsies, but that doesn't really happen. I'm the only one in the state that the American Association of Suicidology is trained in that realm. So that's what River is in a nutshell. We're here to help the vets in any way we can. Last year, we're very proud. We've been going through the books. We've given out almost $600,000 in services to veterans across the state.
Yeah, the 1 every 36 hours seems extremely high, and it is, unfortunately, but there's a lot of people who, depending on their religious views, their perception that suicide is this faux pas, and it is. People don't like talking about it, but tough. It's a reality. This is life. This is what happens. So yeah, that number is staggering high. So hopefully River, the Rural Institute, will be able to lower that number in the years to come. So we'll move over to Fez. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Doing the closed circuit telecasting class, I thought it was going to be very impersonal and much more difficult than what it is. But I'm able to live chat with the students as we're going through the program, and it feels like a classroom, even though I'm just sitting at my desk. It's really an amazing program. If you are a veteran and you have the GI Bill, you should definitely contact us if you're looking to become an EMT or potentially becoming part of the recreational therapy program, and we'll be happy to have you. We're going to make it very successful. You just have to come and contact us.
All right. Well, thank you, Fez. So today we talked about medical issues. Terry hopped on, talked about accessibility and the American Legion. Mike Hopkins hopped on, talked about different red tape issues in the current CVEMT program bill that's getting pushed through. Very exciting. So yeah, thank you very much for listening in. All the listeners who sat in, we really appreciate it. Couldn't do it without you. Also like to thank our sponsor, The Man Shop. Give out amazing haircuts and a lot of fun games while you're waiting. And then also to KGVO Studios for putting this on. We appreciate it. So thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good weekend.